The Origin of Skanda, Part 2. If you haven't watched Part 1, the link is in the description, go watch it.
Becoming benevolent. How did Skanda go from malevolent to benevolent? And why? As Skanda's cult grew, the people were uneasy about Skanda's association with malevolent disease-causing beings. Thus they tried to distance him from that, and hence we see the separation of Skanda in the Mahabharata, previously mentioned. Furthermore, attempts to give the deity a Vedic origin was done. At least they tried to give him, the deity, a divine birth story. The first strategy that was done was using the example of Agni's birth to legitimize Skanda's divine birth. This also allowed Skanda to take up the qualities of Agni Rudra. Fire was auspicious, so was Skanda. The fire's son also had to be auspicious. The next was to give, in the start of the story, that Skanda was to become the divine general. The spoiler kind of sets things up. But why Agni? Why was he chosen, besides the similarities of the Kumaras? One of the unique things about Agni is that he's God in the terrestrial world. He's the link between the earthly world and the divine world. He's understood to be born on earth every time a sacrificial fire is kindled and dies when it's extinguished. Apparently, this would be a problem of how Agni could be immortal if he could die. This means that people were speculating on the nature of divine births on earth. Agni is said to be hidden and has various bodies. Multiple fires at once can be lit. Agni, afraid of being dead in the sacrifice, hides. When there was no fire to do yajnas, the gods find Agni and grant him immortality so he'd return. This is an echo of the hidden Agni theme in the Vedic culture. Look at Rigveda 10.51. Aside from the story of Agni, the takeaway is that there's now a paradigm for a god to be born on earth. Now Skanda, who is earthly in origin, can still be elevated to a divine status as Agni was. The way they did this was making Skanda the son of Agni. Gods were in favor of Agni from the start. How did Skanda get his role as killer of demons? As mentioned numerous times, Skanda's vigor and power can be attributed to a considerable degree to Agni and Rudra. Agni is famed for his role as a demon killer in Rigveda 10.161.1 and in Atharva Veda 8.2.28 and in Shatapatha Brahmana 2.4.2.15. Naturally, Skanda would too become a demon killer. Skanda kills Asuras and Danavas, which are not terrestrial demons. How did Skanda go from earthly to non-earthly will be explored. In the Rajasuya sacrifice, a king goes to his general, Senapati. Foreshadowing, it offers him 2 fires and 8 offering cakes. Shatapatha Brahmana 5.3.1.1 establishes Agni, the sharp-pointed Agni Anikavat, to the Senapati. Having taken up both the Garhapatya and Ahavaniya fires on the 2 kindling sticks, he goes to the house of the commander of the army and prepares a cake on 8 potsherds for Agni Anikavat. For Agni is the head Anika of the gods, and the commander is the head of the army. Hence, for Agni Anikavat, and he, the commander, assuredly is one of the king's jewels. Agni is the head of the gods, akin to the Senapati of a king. This aspect got inherited to Skanda. Now Skanda is the Senapati of the gods. The Abhisheka. Since Skanda is now the Senapati, the Salya Parva in the Mahabharata, whose narrative is probably later than that of the Aranyaka Parva, tries to formalize Skanda as an auspicious being as opposed to a malevolent graha by giving him Abhisheka, which is a coronation ritual, initiating Skanda into the martial class. Let's look at the agenda of the Aranya Parvan. The person or people writing the Aranya Parvan are probably sponsored by kings. Since Mahabharata was receiving royal patronage, the writer wants to focus on the obedience of the king's commander to their superior. A king wouldn't want a court or an army with a Senapati to be wild and chaotic, not to mention disobedient. Skanda, the spirit race, concerns 2 Brahmins and potentially the kings, so he had to be softened up. One tactic to soften him up was associating him with Sanat Kumar on the stage. There are some who claim that he is Lord Sanat Kumara, who is the supreme firstborn of the sacred source of all, who is the son of the paternal grandfather. Mahabharata 9.45.85. Interestingly, the Shalya Parvan of Mahabharata only recognizes the good Skanda, the Mahatman Ayogin, the Yaudayas, which are a warrior group that became ruler. On their coinage had Skanda, a 6-headed figure, or as they referred to him, Brahmanya Deva Kumara. Due to the losses with the Kuṣāṇas, the Yaudayas placed him on their coinage to save their reputation. This means Skanda was already a warrior-type god by the Kuṣāṇas. Why the Yaudayas put Skanda on their coins? The obverse had Brahmanya Deva, but the reverse had a Matar and or a Graha. The Graha and Matar are invoked for protection of children and women. The Yaudayas may have believed that the deities on the coins would protect them on a state level once appropriated. Skanda the Yogi. The Shalyaparva of the Mahabharata doesn't have the inauspicious narrative for Skanda, but he is described as a great yogi. The Shalyaparva narrative might have been later than the Aranyakaparva narrative. This must be from the fact that Skanda's father is a great ascetic. To further the effort by the text to make Skanda a yogin is to associate him with Sanat Kumara, which if you remember is called Skanda in the Chandogya Upanishad, assuming the version of the Upanishad is not interpolated. The Kumara aspect of the name might be the reason for the link. But why does he have 6 heads? The Mahabharata mentions Skanda as having 6 heads because he is the son of 6 Kritikas, but the real answer lies in a different character, Shashti. Shashti is a minor goddess in the Mahabharata Aranyaparva, but don't be fooled by her modesty. The redactors of the Mahabharata would use a male character to dominate the female characters. We see that when Skanda controls the Matars and makes him a motherly figure. In real life, we see, namely on the Yaldai coinage, that Shashti is the deity associated with having 6 heads most of the time. Shashti is also a Graha associated with childbirth. Thus, we see in the Kashyapa Samhita, which is a Sanskrit text, she is mentioned as Skanda's sister. Shashti may have been the origins of Skanda's 6 heads rather than the other way around. Her name means sixth. She is worshipped on the 6th day of an infant's life. Kashyapa Samhita mentions Shashti with 6 heads. Shashti is essentially a goddess related to the Matar cult. As mentioned, this cult became prominent with the Yaudayas ruling. We have panels from the Kuṣāṇa period where Shashti has 6 heads. The 6 heads are now symbolic of the fearful aspect of the Grahas. Shashti is placed on the reverse of the Yaudaya Brahmanya Deva coins to link him to her. Skanda, famed for his Graha-like tendencies, drew then the 6-headed aspect from Shashti due to the similarities of their nature. Of course, this is only a hypothesis. The real reason for Skanda having 6 heads is up to debate, actually. But Skanda with 1 head rather than 6, this is actually a later phenomenon. We see Skanda in modern depictions with 1 head, but this has to do with some foreign influences. On the other coins, we see Brahmanya Deva sometimes depicted with 1 head with 5 dots around him. The 5 dots might represent the additional heads. Indo-Greek coins would have a 1-headed deity with ornamental dots around it. The Yaudayas, who were certainly similar with the Indo-Greek coinage, must have copied the style, hence Skanda was depicted in a 1-headed and softened up form. Now we have the start of depicting Skanda with 1 head. Well, let's look at his wife, Devasena. Devasenapati is a bit of a pun. Skanda is Devasenapati, the lord of the divine army, but it can also mean husband of Devasena. Hence, the double meaning led to the divine army being personified as a goddess. Let's look at more on the Yaudayas. One thing to note is that with the rise of Shaivism, it is better to worship the father, Shiva, than the son, Skanda. This, contrary to intuitions, the epics are at a stage when the cult of Skanda is actually getting lower. Let's look at Skanda's other wife, Valli, or Varli. Valli is the other wife of Skanda/Murugan. The interesting thing about Valli is that she is pure South Indian deity. Her stories are found in the South Indian literatures only, and even in the Sanskrit Skanda-Purana, only the South Indian manuscripts have Valli stories in them, and some of these stories seem to be interpolated. Valli literally means creepers, or of the plant that bears yams. She is a representative of tribal goddesses. The tribal goddesses were probably integrated into the larger Hindu pantheon by her marriage with male deities, in the case of Valli with Murugan. Also has tribal origins, interestingly. She has 2 birthplaces, one in Bahimalai in Tamil Nadu and the other in Katragama in Sri Lanka. The story preserves a lot of the Tamil themes, despite any Sanskrit influences. The oldest reference to Valli is in the 2nd to 3rd century AD poem Narinai. Sanskritization began around the time of the composition of the Tirumurukarupattai, which is in the 2nd to 4th century AD, though some say later. First time that the North Indian consort Devasena is alluded to in the Tamil literature so far. In the Sri Lankan version, the two lovers stay in the forest after the wedding in Kadragama. Vali was also born amongst the Vedda in Sri Lanka. In contrast to the Skanda-Purana, the Tamil poems mention conflict. In one story, Devasena was the older sister of Vali and thus was to be married to Murugan the first. Vali tried to woo Murugan though, and Devasena cursed her to be born as a tribal girl. Well, let's look at the full story, which is as follows. In the previous birth, she was the daughter of Vishnu. In the birth next, she was born as Sundaravali. In the village of Valimala, there lived a hunter named Nambi who had all sons but wanted one child to be a girl. Meanwhile, a sage named Shivani Perumal Vishnu, who on earth was meditating till he saw a beautiful female deer. His enchantment somehow impregnated the doe, which gave birth to a human girl in a pit. The pit was dug by women who were searching for the yams, Vali. The doe abandoned the human child but was adopted by Nambi and his wife. Vali got her name as she was found in the creepers/yam. Vali led the life of a huntress, and at age 12 she would guard the fields from birds and beasts. When Narada saw her and her beauty, he informed Murugan. Murugan then disguised himself as the hunter and went to Vali and her family. Then some hunters returned with their catch of the day, prompting Vali's parents to head out. Murugan then revealed his true form and professed his love. Vali was shocked and warned Murugan that her family won't allow such a marriage. Murugan then turned into a shameful ascetic and got blessings from the family. Murugan then asked Vali for food. After eating the offered food, Murugan took Vali to a pond in the forest where he asked Vali to satisfy his love. Vali declined and turned back into the field. Murugan invoked his brother Vinayaka to scare Vali in the form of a scary elephant. In terror, Vali rushed into the arms of Murugan, who was in his true form. In awe of Murugan, she revealed that she was the daughter of Vishnu and Tirumal, and loved Murugan. They made love, and when the time was over, she sadly returned to her home. She was depressed, and the village thought she was possessed. They decided to throw a festival in honor of Murugan. Murugan came to the field, and at midnight he snuck Vali out to the lote. Nambi's wife was shocked by the disappearance. The village hunters led a chase of the kidnapper. They discharged arrows at Murugan. Upon finding him, Murugan's cock crowed and the hunters fell dead. Murugan then took Vali away, and Vali explained that he should have asked for her parents' consent. Murugan agreed and turned back. He resurrected the hunters and showed his divine form. The hunters were shocked and prayed. The two returned to the village where they were properly married. The two returned to Skanda-Karttikeya, where they were welcomed by Devasena. In the Sri Lankan version, the role of Murugan is replaced by Kandayaka, the spirit that the Veda people worship in real life. The Vedas would worship Kandayaka before doing a hunt. In this version, Vali vows to only marry Kandayaka. Her vow comes true as Kandayaka reciprocated the love. In this version, Vali becomes angry at Kandayaka in human form and goes back. The story unfolds in a similar fashion as the Tamil version. Vali and Murugan's marriage symbolizes ideal love. Tamil love poems would compare two lovers to the love between the two deities, Murugan and Vali. These lives also demonstrate that love is beyond class distinction. Vali was a tribal girl, while Murugan was a god. The story has the pre-Sanskritic Tamil theme of a spontaneous and immediate love. In the Tamil poem Chilapatikaram, 4th century AD, we see Vali alluded to, one of the earliest. The songs to her give us the clues to her origin. She is a goddess of the Kuravar tribe. The women of that tribe would pray to her for a marriage that is Kalavu or clandestine, and she is regarded as the daughter of the Kura tribe and was the patron goddess of the folk marriages. Hence, Vali, we can conclude as a tribal goddess. I'll do a video on the origin of Indian goddesses at a later time. Let's look at the cock, the rooster, that is one of the companions of Murugan. The thing is that the cock is seldom used in Vedic rituals. It's used in Ashwamedha, but the cock is one of the animals that is to be released, not sacrificed. The cock is also impure for Brahmins. The fact that the cock is used in the village in South Indian and tribal rituals for appeasement of local deities or spirits suggests that Murugan and Skanda and his association with the divine cock is non-Vedic, i.e. Dravidian or Austroasiatic, but likely Dravidian in origin. The peacock, however, is a different story and will be covered later. Thank you for watching.